It's recording. Okay. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our very first APAC webcast series, where we're going to be looking at reimagining your grading with Gradescope, Turnitin's Gradescope. Our focus today is just looking at lessons learned from peers, and peers, by peers, we mean current Gradescope users across 2 universities. The purpose for this webcast series is to see how we can learn from users of Gradescope across the Asia Pacific region. And today with us in the house is who will be presenting. We've got 2 presenters from the University of Melbourne, Matt Daiki and Maggie. And we have also a presenter from the National Taiwan University. I will let them introduce themselves when I hand it over to them, because I feel everyone should be able to introduce themselves the best way they can. I'm very aware of who they are. Just for housekeeping, the session is going to be recorded for anyone who's joining the session. If you have questions, feel free to put them in the Q&A. All members who are joining the call from anywhere in the Asia Pacific region and around the world will be muted. The chat in this case will not be making use of that. But it will be open, but we'll be only responding to the questions and answers from the Q&A block. Before I begin, I just want to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we are currently based, Turnitin, as well as where I'm currently living in Essendon, Melbourne, the Wurundjeri people. I want to acknowledge the elders, both past, present, and emerging. I want to thank them for the opportunity to be on this land and be doing this webcast series. What are we going to be covering in today's session? We're just going to be looking at how different institutions have handled assessments prior to Gradescope, why Gradescope is a preferred technology, what have they learned about Gradescope, how they've used Gradescope in the courses, subjects, and what benefits they get from Gradescope, how they achieve one of the core purpose for which Gradescope was created, which is feedback consistency while they're grading. And another really rich feature of Gradescope is the assignment statistics, which informs how students are learning and how they use this. These are a few things we're going to be covering in today's session. But before we get into that, I just want to do a quick spiel. This is me. I am the Assessment Solutions Consultant with Turnitin Asia Pacific, supporting the region in all things assessments and supporting feedback and product designing with regards to all our assessment tools. What is Gradescope? I thought we'll give you, for anyone who's joining the call, just want to begin by giving a disclaimer that this is not a demo session. This is generally just to give you an intro into what Gradescope is. I will put some information with regards to, if you want to learn more about Gradescope, we have a weekly Thursday workshops. So this session is more about learning from the users of Gradescope and seeing how you might begin to reimagine your assessment so that you can deliver your assessment successfully. History of Gradescope started in 2014. At the time, we've got 2.4 million answers. At this stage in 2021, we have over 400 million plus assignments submitted, 90,000 plus instructors, and over 1,250 plus institutions across the globe. Gradescope, for me, is a leading assessment and feedback platform that supports how you grade effectively and supports you in transforming that grading or marking process into learning. For anyone who's joining the call, I know different regions, different countries refer to marking, some refer to grading. For the context of this webcast, I want to point out that grading is synonymous with marking. Like pointed out earlier, how does Gradescope support learning, and how does it support you as a user or as an academic instructor or educator in your assessment process? It supports you by reducing the time to grading. We know that we spend a lot of time marking because we have to think about how we want to frame feedback, how we want to give the students scores. It also helps in supporting the consistency in feedback. So whatever you're saying for one student is applied with the same student, and that's done with the dynamic nature of the rubric. And in terms of understanding how your students are performing in your class, Gradescope's assignment statistics helps you pinpoint the knowledge gaps. You're better able to identify which students are struggling, what areas of your learning outcomes students are struggling with, or even in your course, and put in the right or just-in-time mechanism to support your students to succeed. What are the different types of assessment Gradescope supports? Currently supports the variable length assignments, which will be your problem sets or your projects, as well as fixed templated assignments like your regular exams, your quizzes that you do in a paper format as well. And this diagram gives you a visual of the different assignment types these Gradescope currently supports, but we're also seeing that different universities or institutions are using Gradescope for different courses as well. In terms of streamlining the grading of paper-based assessment, this is basically your assessments where students currently do their assessments or do the homework in a paper. Gradescope can support the process of actually letting students do it anywhere and they can upload it with their phone. They can take a photo of their phone and submit it. At the same time, an academic can do the marking from anywhere around the world, as long as there's an internet to access the product. You can also do your typical online assessment, which you can assess from anywhere. You can do the basic things of enforcing your time limits, as well as supporting students in assessments that involve image uploads or videos in question text. So that's a visual for you over there. Talking about the rubrics, this is what a typical interface looks like for Gradescope. The marking interface is the same. The rubric is always it's usually on the right of your screen, and you can add rubric items while you're grading. Each time you adjust the rubric item, the same level of feedback will be applied to all students for which the rubric is applied to. And this is also showing you how you can be explicit in terms of your feedback. You can give a point. At the same time, you can explain what that point means for your students as well. Now, if you want to learn more, like I said, this is not a demo. If you want to learn more, we currently have weekly Thursday workshops at 2 p.m. Australian Eastern Time. I've just put in the next 3 sessions. For those people who want to sign up, you can go to info.gradescope.com at APAC weekly workshops and sign up. You'll be very pleased and you'd learn a lot. I think for us at Turnitin we're looking at creating that community of practice where different academics across different disciplines can share how they're using Gradescope and support academics who might want to try Gradescope. So attending the workshop will give you an idea of what Gradescope is currently used for, the different assignment types, and also walk you through how to set up this assignment and grade effectively. I will pass on now to Matt Dykey and Maggie, who will be presenting and talking to you about the experience with Gradescope at Melbourne University, especially in the math department. Matt and Maggie, over to you.
Welcome, everyone. Thanks for having me, Chuck. So as mentioned, I'm going to be talking about the Melbourne University experience, mainly talking about the accounting department where Maggie and myself are from, but also will be talking a bit about the wider experience as well. So Chuck, can you just show us our little agenda? Next slide. So going to talk briefly about how Melbourne's handled exams historically, why we've used Gradescope both as a university, but also talking a bit more about our experience, why we've adopted Gradescope and how we use it, again, both as a university and our own specific experience. The benefits we found with Gradescope, focusing very much on that marking aspect, give you a few examples of how different aspects of or different parts of Melbourne Uni has been using Gradescope, as well as talking briefly about how we've looked at the analytics to track student performance. Chuck, next slide. So here on the screen, on the right-hand side is, for people familiar with Melbourne, the Royal Exhibition Building. That's where, before COVID hit and before the pandemic, where we actually held most of exams. It can sit about 2,800 students at once, doing paper-based handwritten exams. And we had all sorts of exam types. 2,800 at once was important because we have some subjects with up to, and in this semester, actually just over 2,000 students sitting the same paper-based exam at once. So therefore, we had to pay points with that many students. Multiple markers, there's no way any one person could mark 2,000 papers without it being purely multiple choice. So this might have meant that we might have had 2 or 3 markers even marking the same question, which meant across the paper we might have had 30, 40, up to 30 or 40 people involved in marking, and 20, 25 being quite common. So with that many different markers and different people marking the same question, marking consistency was always a concern. Have the markers been consistent with themselves? Have they been consistent with each other? So always been a bit of a problem. Also, because it was a paper-based exam, you've got the typical issues with a paper-based exam. I'm sure everyone here's, when they've done marking, has started marking, looked at how they marked, looked at how students have answered and gone, this isn't quite working for me. I'm going to have to adjust the way I'm marking, which meant that if it's on paper, particularly the way we did it, in my own department, we weren't allowed to leave notes. I think it was just pure mark. We had to go back and remark everything every single time we adjusted that marking scheme, which can be a bit annoying in an exam situation. With so many papers, one of our biggest issues was around storage and handling. Think about it, 2,000 students sitting at once in the exhibition building, off campus, getting the papers from the exam centre to the departments, onto the academics, figuring out how we're going to secure it, how the markers are going to access the paper, how we're going to actually keep the paper secure while various markers are marking it. With so many markers, meant we had to mark on campus, so how do we give people access to the marking, but only give access to the people who needed access? So always discussions around how the security and handling. And at Melbourne, traditionally we have a 3-week marking period, but all grades are due on the same day, effectively in week 4 of marking. So if you were unlucky enough to end up with an exam quite late in the marking period, we had a very short turnaround, sometimes less than a week, to get those marks turned around. And so these are the kind of things that we were considering both at the university level and even at my level, going, how can we make this better to avoid some of these issues? Next slide, please, Chuck. So as an institution, I'm not necessarily a decision maker, but in preparing for this, did have a couple of conversations with the decision makers, is we were looking at Gradescope already. We were a Turnitin customer, been a Turnitin customer for quite some time. And even before COVID-19 and the pandemic, we were already looking at, could we use Gradescope to offer some marking benefits, particularly in our more mathematical-based exams. So Gradescope was already being examined. And the main reason for that was that benefit of that AI marking, scanning the papers in and getting the system to look for that similar paper so we could actually mark them in groups, addressing many of the logistic issues around handling large classes. Also, just the problems with marking mathematical symbols in particular. With COVID-19, and if people aren't aware, Melbourne's going, or Victoria's going back into lockdown tonight, we had to come up with a way to put our exams online. So Gradescope was adopted across the university as one of the options that academics like myself had access to deliver the exams. Different academics adopted Gradescope for different reasons. Some of it was at suitability of question type. So Gradescope can be quite flexible with the type of questions you ask, particularly with that scan and upload option. There's really no limit to the type of question you can ask. And for me, the benefit and the main reason why I adopted Gradescope was possible marking benefits, which I'll talk a bit more about in depth. Next slide. So looking about how it's answered at the university level, again, just highlight, it was originally used by the mathematical subjects. So I've got an example there on the right-hand side of how one of our maths exams have been set and a type of formula. And this can also answer one of the questions on the Q&A chat. What we actually found is that this ability to scan and categorize actually attracted a few of our other areas. In particular, foreign language subjects largely have adopted Gradescope quite effectively, because it means that I could actually ask questions and get students to answer the questions using a different language, and Gradescope then combined the similar answers together for marking purposes. And the same thing was happening in our music subjects, where the students were actually answering questions using musical notation, scanning and uploading the answer. In hindsight, looking back, we're not surprised. It makes perfect sense to us looking back, but it wasn't something that the university expected when adopting it, that these areas, these generally humanity areas, were going to be one of the bigger adopters of Gradescope with that scan and upload. Other than that, very much used in our STEM and quantitative subjects. So I teach accounting, we use it in a few of us, teaching business, faculty of business economics, and quite a few of our economics and finance subjects also use it as well for that mathematical type symbols. Personally, my subject that I'm currently teaching has no numbers there. I teach accounting, but I teach an accounting subject without any numbers. I use it for purely written assignments because of the marking benefits. So some subjects also use it because, hey, it handles the written assignments well quite effectively. Next slide, please, Chuck. So I'm going to pass across to Maggie to talk more about my discipline level of accounting and why we've adopted Gradescope.
Yes, so hi everyone, I'm Maggie. So in terms of how we use Gradescope in the accounting department, so both from a discipline level, but also within the specific subject that Matt and I teach, we mainly use Gradescope for examinations, and particularly in the subject that we teach, Gradescope enables a consistency of format with the paper-based exam. We were able to ask questions, the same type of questions that we have asked in the paper-based exam on Gradescope. So this gave us that flexibility as well, and easy sort of transition into an online exam.
Just to jump in quickly there, and this is something that when we moved online wasn't possible with many of the alternatives we had to choose from.
Yes. So the major pain point in a lot of the accounting subject is that with the debit and credit subject especially, there is a lot of use of tables, and assessing this in an online examination, like Matt just mentioned, would be difficult in the other exam tools that we currently have. But the ability for Gradescope to do that scan and to scan in and upload the student answers enables us to assess these examinations as well. The different formats of Gradescope that we generally use within the accounting subjects are basically the homework problem set or the exam and quiz, which enables the uploading, scanning and upload of the answers, as well as the online assignment, which we use in our subject, where students type directly into Gradescope their written answer. So in the next few slides, we'll show a few examples of that. Thanks, Chuck. So some of the benefits of Gradescope that we've seen here can be categorized into three main categories. So the first one is in terms of scanning. So this scanning and upload capability or ability that Gradescope has enables remote exam for subjects that are hard to deliver online. So for instance, in terms of anything that needs to be handwritten, this scanning and uploading will enable the exam to be carried out, even if it's remotely. In terms of marking, this is where, like as mentioned previously, we see a lot of the benefit in. So firstly, the rubric enables us to have greater marking consistency within, by noting down sort of where each point should be awarded. It enables us across markers to have that consistency in marking and the breakdown in where sort of the mark will be awarded for each answer. It also enables the adjustment of marking, an easier adjustment of marking. So as Matt mentioned earlier in this presentation, adjustment of marking in a paper-based exam was difficult, but within Gradescope, the moment we realized we need to adjust a particular mark, we could do that easily, and it will apply to all previous papers that we have marked automatically without us having to go back and review those papers. Multiple markers can simultaneously mark the same paper. So this is also a huge benefit, especially in terms from an efficiency perspective, in terms of that turnaround. So having multiple markers mark the same paper means that we don't need to wait for the other marker to finish a group of papers that they're marking before we can start on their paper. We can essentially have all markers simultaneously marked at the same time. In terms of the way we mark, we could either mark question by question or paper by paper. And in Gradescope, this is really easy, whether it's just a difference between whether you're clicking the left and right arrow keys or the up and down arrow keys. And then you should be able to navigate through the papers easily. The last category is in terms of exam viewing and review. So we realized this by the time it comes to exam review. In the past, when we did paper-based exam, during exam review period, some of our exam review, it's about a month or 2 months after we finish marking. And as Matt mentioned previously, a lot of times there will be multiple markers marking same exam paper. While the marking is generally pretty consistent, when it comes to giving student feedback, oftentimes when we don't see any type of note, we just see sort of like a total mark awarded for a particular question, it will take us quite a bit of time to actually look through the question, look through the answer again, and figure out sort of how did that mark come to that particular marking. But with Gradescope, we realized in an exam review situation, you are able to see all the mark breakdown, therefore enabling us to more easily provide that feedback to the students. Next, please, Chuck. Thank you. So this is one of the examples from physics, I believe, with regards to the exam quiz format where the students upload in their document and the marker would be assessing using a rubric, and that's the breakdown of the rubric that they use to mark this particular paper. Next slide, please, Chuck. And this is one example from our own department. So this is where the subject would be asking students to upload a PDF form into the into Gradescope, and each cell becomes an answer box. In doing that, the Gradescope AI capability is able to group most of the answers together. There were a few that we have to sort of figure out the groupings ourselves, but for the most part, they were able to group a majority of the answer together. And as we can see in the slide over here, like that 3,960, we are essentially marking 847 answers all at once. And this allows both consistency and also this is highly efficient. The timing to set up the marking sort of is brought to the start of the marking period where we set up these groupings. But once all of that is set up, marking is very, very efficient. Next slide, please, Chuck. Thank you. And this is from our own subject, so where it's accounting, but it's all qualitative. This is the online assignment format of the Gradescope exam, or of Gradescope, where students would type in their answer. And we found that this is highly suitable for a case study type of question because it enables us to have one single case and for the students to answer the question that's relevant to the case. In other forms of exam tools, sometimes they would have to repeat the case multiple times across different questions. But with this format, we were able to put in the case and just have a list of sub-questions for the students to answer. And I will pass it back to Matt.
Yeah. So as mentioned previously, at least at Melbourne at the moment, largely speaking, our use of Gradescope is focused very much on the end of semester exam, occasionally the mid-semester exam as well, but it's exam-based, which doesn't necessarily give us the ability to do as much in terms of providing feedback to students during the semester, but it's still quite important for us. For us, one of the big ability is the ability to provide an overview on a question by question or student by student basis. Now we've got much deeper analysis of how students are actually answering the question. Not only are we seeing the total mark, but we can even see how the mark was allocated quite easily by either clicking on the question starts to look at the rubric and go, okay, here are how the marks were allocated for this question, or going and looking at it from a student by student basis. Which meant for us, when we're looking at the statistics or even just the average for each question, it I find it quite useful because it gave me a chance to sit back and reflect and go, why were students performing this one exam? If I did well on exam, why was that? Was it an easy question? Was it an area that we taught particularly well? Was it possibly collusion? Thankfully, I didn't have any instances of that. Or in terms of poor performance, was it, again, an area we didn't maybe teach as well? Was it a hard question where we expected this? But it actually gave me a much better idea of where students were doing well and doing poorly, so that when it comes to the end of finalising the final grade, where we might actually have to make judgments about, was this a fair exam? Do I need to scale? Do I need to make any adjustments? I actually had lots of stats to back up that judgment. But I also had lots of stats about how students performed individual questions, which we've actually used a bit to actually inform future delivery. It's like when an area wasn't done as well, particularly with the shift to online, it gave us a chance to be able to sit back and reflect and go, okay, could we maybe put in a few extra resources for students to explain the area a bit better for the next cohort? So that's a bit it about the Melbourne experience. I'm going to pass it back to Chuck.
Excellent. I'm just going to turn on my video. Thanks, Matt and Maggie. We're going to move on, and we're going to pause questions. I initially thought we could do questions now, but I'm just looking at the time. But I want to also give an opportunity for us to hear from Chungwei Lin of National Taiwan University and see how he uses Gradescope. Chungwei, I will be passing on this on to you now. I will just move right over to you.
Hey. Yeah, thank you. Hello, everyone. So I'm Zhongwei Lin from National Taiwan University, and I'm actually in the Department of Computer Science and Information Engineering. So next slide, please. So I will cover my experience with Gradescope, and I will show some statistics first to show how fast and how accurate we can grade. And then I will show some example question, and I will provide some tips. And I think those tips also show the advantages of Gradescope. Okay, next slide, please. So I think my experience is a little bit different from other Gradescope users. So I started using Gradescope in 2013. So I think Chuck just mentioned that Gradescope was founded in 2014, but actually I used it before 2014 because before that, it is called Panda Grader. And as you may know, the Gradescope or the Panda Grader was developed by some student at UC Berkeley. And at that time, I'm a student, PhD student at UC Berkeley. So I'm a teaching assistant of discrete math and the probability theory. So at that time, although Gradescope has not been founded, but we have started using this kind of system. And yeah, after that, yeah, I can say I become a fan of Gradescope. So after that, I'm a lecturer of the same course. And even after that, I become an assistant professor at National Taiwan University. In all of my courses, I use Gradescope as my grading tool for homework and the exams. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, this is some statistics. So yeah, you can see that when I was at UC Berkeley, and the course is discrete math and probability theory. So there are so many students in one course. And this is the reason that those students, they have not been declared, means they have not decided to join which department. And at this point, I think many students want to join a CS department, so they need to take this course. So that's the reason we have so many students. So you can see 500, 700, or even in the summer session, we have 300 students. And as you can imagine, if you have 500 students, how can you grade the exam? So I think as mentioned by Matt and Maggie, yeah, we face the same problem that in 2013 spring, so we have 500 students, we have 3 exams. In the first 2 exams, we use paper-based exam. So after the exam, so we can see there's a super high pile of papers. I think it's even higher than one person's height, yeah. And then we have many TA. Of course, we can grade the exam, but the problem is, okay, we say, okay, let's have a grading party. We reserve a room, and every TA is inside the room, and we start grabbing a pile and start grading. Okay, and after 1 day, you will see there are like 10 or 20 piles around the classroom, and we are not sure which, for example, one pile it has been totally graded, and the other pile is totally non-graded. It's totally a mess. Yeah, and even we say, okay, let's do it tomorrow, or let's say, okay, let's grab some exam back home for one TA to grade it. But the problem is, if there's one pile that is totally not graded, yeah, you need to give to TA1, okay? And after the TA return the exam, the other TA need to grade it again next day. So it will make the total grading process so long, and it's a mess. Yeah, in short, it's a mess. And another problem we face is, okay, sometimes when you started grading a question, sometimes you don't know what's the meaning of the student. Okay, you need to grade several similar answers, then you start understanding what's the meaning of this kind of answer. Okay, but if you use the old paper-based grading, the problem is you don't know where the old graded exam it is. Yeah, it's somewhere in the classroom, but you cannot find it. Okay, so that's very tiring. As a result, we cannot change our mind, or we cannot regrade students' answer. So it's very, very bad, or it's very inefficient in the grading process. So in the final exams, okay, one student suggests saying, okay, we heard that there's a tool, we call it Panda Grader, but actually it's Gradescope. So first time, actually, most of TA or even the lecturer is, how can I say, we hesitate a little bit to use it, because we feel, oh, we have 500 students, we need to scan all of the exam. You see, the very tiring task. So, but no matter how, so we decided to try it, and as a result, it's very efficient to us. Even the scanning, because some scanner can automatically scan those exam page by page. And Panda Grader or Gradescope, they have the functionality. You can scan like 10 students exam, and it will cut the page for you. So it's very efficient to us. So as a result, even I am the TA of the same course next year, we always use Gradescope. And even I become the lecturer of the same course, yeah, I still use the Gradescope. Okay, so that's my experience. And okay, in short, we want to use it because we have so many students, and the grading paper-based exam is totally infeasible. So we start changing it to Gradescope. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so after I came back to NTU, so here is some stats in the recent semester. So last year I teach a course is Digital System Design the Lab. Okay, in the final exam, we have 6 pages. Each page is A4 size, and I have 90 students, and I grade the final exam by myself. And the stage is I complete all grading, 90 students and 6 pages for each student in 7.5 hours. Of course, it depends on how you design the question. I will show some example question later, but yeah, you can really do it in a very fast way. Okay, and another question is this semester, same course, we have 144 students, yeah, much more. And this time, I let teaching assistant to grade the homework. And the homework is due at noon on Monday, and usually I leave 1 hour buffer for student. So the submission side of Gradescope is closed at 1 p.m. on Monday. And our experience is we can announce the grade at just 2 minutes after the deadline. Okay, so how can we do that? Because you can start grading when students after students submit their submission. Okay, so the good thing is even some students are still working on the homework, you can start grading. Okay, and after the deadline, actually, there are not so many students who will submit right before the deadline. So actually, you just need like 2 minutes to grade the less minute submission. So that's something we can achieve. Okay, and again, the same course, so midterm, also this semester, we have 144 students, same, and we have 7 pages. At this time, we grade the homework, grade the midterm by TA and myself. And again, we can complete the grading in 24 hours. So that's the stats about our efficiency. And that's something you can achieve with Gradescope. Okay, next slide, please. And of course, we should not just say it's very efficient. We should also say it's very accurate and very consistent. Okay, so this again is my example. So these 2 scenarios I just mentioned in last slides, but as you may know, there are some regret request function in Gradescope. And you can see we have only 4 regret requests, means some students feel we graded wrong or they don't feel it's fair. So they want us to check it again. But you can see we have so many students, we have so many questions, but we actually has very limited regret requests. Of course, you want to achieve this, you need to accompany with some policy. I will mention it later, but yeah, we can let the regret requests. I mean, student will always argue some point, but we can make the process very easy and simple. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, this is an example question in my exam. So I think Matt and Maggie show some example of the, for example, show answer question, or you need to answer some number in a table. Yeah, that's very good question design. And this is another type of question design in my exam. So the course is about circuit. I ask students to draw a circuit, and it's a circuit transformation. Okay, so if you want to make the grading very efficient, I think one good example is like this. You can have a template of the answer, and you leave some space empty and ask students to fill in those empty space. So the good thing is if you use Panda Grader to grade the exam, it will match or localize the answer of each question. You need to mark the space that student will answer. So in this case, you can just mark this figure, and every time when you grade exam question by question, every time you will just see the figure from student. You don't need to search the solution from student on the paper. Yeah, it can localize it, and you can just directly see if they draw the correct gate. Gate is the turn in the circuit, and then you can say, okay, if you need to draw, in this example, 7 gates, and if there's no mistake, of course, full credit. If one mistake, for example, 1 gate is missing, or you add an unnecessary gate, you deduct 2 points, for example, and you can complete the grading in a very efficient way. Okay, next slide. Okay, this is another example question in my exam. So it's about running an algorithm. And of course, we don't want students to run the algorithm in a messy way. And again, you need to search how they run the algorithm. So one design which can make your grading more efficient is you prepare a table and ask students to run the algorithm and complete the table. And in this example, we list the number of iterations you need, and student need to write down the correct number in the algorithm execution. And again, if you want to grade this question, you can say if the table is totally correct, full credit. If there's 1 mistake, maybe it's 2-point deduction, and the multiple mistake, 4 or 6-point deduction. So that's how we design the question. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so the following several slides, I want to share some of my tips about Gradescope. I think these tips also demonstrate how good the Gradescope is. Okay, so the overall goal is you want to make the grading very efficient, very fast, for sure. And Gradescope can help you to achieve very accurate and consistent grading. Okay, that's some stats I just showed. And another good thing is Gradescope can show very clear grading, means you can leave the rubric items to student. So student will understand why the point was deducted. Yeah, sometimes if you use a paper-based grading, you just say, oh, it's wrong. You don't provide any explanation. That will leave some problems. Okay, Another thing is I want to emphasize is private. For example, if you want to return the exam to student, sometimes, okay, you return it to student in the class, or some teacher just leave the exam in front of the door of his office or her office. At this point, student A can see the score of student B. So that's something we don't want it to happen. So if you use Gradescope, you can provide this private grading. Yeah. So every student can have their privacy. And here, I think I can also add one more item is virtual. So virtual means, I think, as mentioned by Maggie and Matt, that yeah, you don't need to face student, especially during the pandemic. Yeah. So everything is virtual. So you don't need to meet those students face by face. Sometimes if student wants to argue the point, yeah, face to face is also a problem, right? They don't want to leave if they don't get a point, right? If it is virtual, you can easily decide to give the student point or not. And if it's homework, remember to ask student to select the pages, because for exam, Gradescope can localize the question, the solution by itself, but for homework, student need to select the page by themselves. For exam, of course, you need to leave enough space for student to write down their answers. And I think rubric item design is also very important. So one strategy we will use is usually we will explain the rubric item or use write down the rubric item in a more strict way so that student will feel they get more points than what they should get. I think that's also one strategy you can reduce the number of regret requests. But the most important thing is you need to be fair, need to be consistent. I think, yeah, here is just a tip to make students happier. Next slide. Okay, and I think that's very important, also mentioned by Matt and Maggie, that you should grade question by question rather than student by student so that it can become very consistent. And you have different kind of rubric item design. For example, if you have a 6-point question, you can say 6420 point for correct, minor mistake, major mistake, or totally wrong. Or you can also separate the question into 3 steps. Each step is 2 points. So that's something, it depends on the question design. You can pick the one, it's good for you. And remember, you can reorder rubric item anytime, and you can use keyboards, the 1, 2, 3 to select the rubric items. So it's very convenient if you can order the rubric item in a way that is easy for you to grade the exam, and then change the order. It's easy for student to understand the rubric item. So that's something you can definitely do during your grading. Next slide. Okay, and yeah, you should select one rubric item so that it will mark as graded. So that's if you want to track the status of your grading progress, then that's an important step. And sometimes if the homework or exam is graded by TA, in some special case, they cannot decide to give or not give the point to student. So they want lecturer or teachers to decide what to do. Then in this case, you can ask TA to add a rubric item is check later or need review. And before you announce the grade, the teacher or the lecturer can check those submission and decide what to do. And of course, you need to remember to remove the item before you announce the grade. And even in an extreme case, if you want to catch some cheating student, then you can also leave a rubric item, say potential cheating, and you can review then after you complete most of the grading. But of course, again, you need to remember to remove the item before announcing the grade. Okay, so another very good advantage is you can change the score of a rubric items anytime. So that's happened frequently that originally you think one question just deserved 2 points. But after many grading, so you start feeling that you want to change it from 2 points to 4 points. In a paper-based exam, it's almost impossible because you don't know how to get back those paper-based submission. Or even you get back those submission, you need to search the answer and change the point. It's really, really tiring. So, but in Gradescope, you just change your number, everything is done. Okay. Okay, another tip is you can click the magnifier of each rubric item to see the list of students who are linked with the rubric item. And that is also very helpful if you want to review those answers again. Sometimes you want to change your mind, say, oh, maybe it's deserve more points. You want to check, have a more detailed review, then that's something you can do. Again, this is also very helpful if you really want to check if students are cheating. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, I think that's probably the last slide. So after grading, so remember, you can release the rubric items to students. So I know Gradescope can say, you can select not to release the rubric item, but my experience is students will feel better if they can see rubric items. And that's another thing is that's something I know until this semester. So students can only know the stats of the for example, the median, the high score, lowest score, or average via the published email. Yeah, you will publish email to send email to students, say, oh, the grading is completed. So by default, Gradescope will provide those dates. But if you remove those dates, student will not know the dates. So that's just a reminder. And talking about regret request, actually, yeah, maybe, yeah, we are not so friendly to students. So our policy is, yeah, student can challenge, say you are wrong. And we say challenge means you challenge our grading. And if your challenge, if your grade, if your score is increased, we say it's a successful challenge. If your score is not increased, we say it is an unsuccessful challenge. Okay, our policy is every student has 2 free challenges. Starting from the 3 unsuccessful challenge, their point will be deducted. So that's some penalty for students who just without any reason to challenge our grading. But based on our experience in the past so many semesters, so if you use Gradescope, actually your grading is very efficient and very accurate. So even we have this policy, but I mean, even students challenging us, but in most cases, it is unsuccessful challenge, and there will not be too many regret requests because from the beginning, your grading is very accurate. So that's some tips we use in my courses. Okay, next slide. Yeah, I think that's everything from my side. So yeah, thanks.
Perfect. All right, I want to say a big thank you to Maggie, Chungwei, and Matt for this really elaborate conversation with regards to the experience with Gradescope. It's very beautiful to see how different universities use Gradescope and how it's making life easy for them, as well as supporting the process of informing learning and actually helping you identify how you can improve your course materials as well. We have about 10 minutes, so we will put it out there for questions. I've got my moderators in the background, Michael and Nick. Do we have any questions we want to throw out to Chungwei, Matt, and Maggie?
No, I think we're all good for the moment.
For the moment, okay. All right, perfect. So if we don't have, I'm assuming most of the questions were answered while we're doing the conversations and everyone seems happy. I do have questions because we have 10 minutes and I'm a stickler for using my time when I get it. So my first question is around when you think about your experience with Gradescope. I know you did talk about your biggest point, but let's look at the administering and the marking assessment prior to Gradescope. You may have alluded to this. I will start with Chungwei. What were your biggest pain points? And I know you started before everyone in 2013. I think you said 2013. So what were your biggest pain points prior to Gradescope?
I think just the biggest pain point is there are too many submissions, too many students, and the overall process is too slow. Yeah, it's too slow and it's too tiring. I mean, it's too slow, so it's too tiring, and as a result, it will not be consistent. I think that's it's like a snowball. Yeah, but from the beginning, I think it's too many students, too slow. And with Gradescope, it's much faster. That's my biggest pain point. Yeah.
Matt, Maggie, I'm just going to take this slide off so you don't see the questions. I'll read them out. Matt, Maggie, what were your biggest pain points in administering marking assessments prior to Gradescope?
Do you want to go first, Maggie?
Yeah, so just like what Matt mentioned earlier in the presentation, it's also very similar to what sort of Chongwei mentioned. There is a lot of paper handling that we have to go through, and passing papers sort of from one marker to the next. With a paper-based exam, it was difficult to do sort of simultaneous marking at the same time, which means that if we're pressed for time in terms of marking, then we are really under the pump in terms of having to get the marking done. And there will be a lot of sort of working overtime to ensure that the marking actually gets done on time. But with Gradescope, the ability to simultaneously mark does reduce a lot of that. Got anything else to add, Matt?
Yeah, I'll add to that, and data entry. When you, like our first year subject, which does use Gradescope with 1,800 students, that's a lot of grades to transfer from paper into the system to give final grades, but it was a 2-day job just about in data entry. It's now a 2-minute job.
Excellent. Wow, I'm really pleased to hear that Gradescope is supporting that. Remember when I used to be an academic back in the former life, that used to be the biggest. I basically spent my weekend adding things to Excel sheets. So yeah, I totally get it. The next question is, how do you feel, and we'll start with Maggie this time. How do you feel Gradescope has impacted your students in terms of quality and timeliness of feedback they receive?
We use Gradescope mainly for sort of from an exam perspective. Therefore, the feedback we give them is probably around sort of exam review time. And when it comes to exam review times, it definitely made it a lot more efficient. So for instance, students have a certain time frame that they have with us discussing, talking through their exam, looking at sort of what they did wrong, what they didn't do wrong. And in the past, when they ask a particular question, we would always go, oh, wait, just let me look at your answer again. Let me look at the question again, and then figure out the mark. But now it's, okay, I see the mark breakdown straight away. Okay, you didn't do this. Therefore, this is the mark that you've got. So it's a lot more efficient, and that exam review time can be used much more efficiently.
Matt?
Maggie answered. I don't have anything else to add to that one.
Perfect. Chingwei, have you got anything else?
Yeah, I think, that's similar answer. I mean, just because everything is efficient and accurate, I think the overall feedback from students is good. And if they have any question and if they need any explanation, everything we can do it online and very efficient, and everything is very clear. So, and students are very happy. That's the same.
Right. My next question is sort of alluded to.
Can I just jump in for a second? We've got some questions that have come through from the attendees. So the first one is a question for the panelists, and it was asked, was it difficult to onboard instructors to switch to Gradescope? And was there any challenges to convince them to use Gradescope? And was it a top-bottom approach?
Honestly, I think my challenge is going to be if I have to switch back, I'm going to get lynched. It's the challenge to onboard was easy. One thing that we all found, particularly with the use of shortcut keys, grading is so simple. You've got the marking guide, the rubric on screen there with you at all times. It's using the number pad backwards and forwards to enter the grade straight away. It's a quick demonstration. Took us, Maggie can convince me, less than 5 minutes to onboard any new marker. It's simple, easy to use, and so much better. My problem, like I said, is going to be if we stop using it, I'm going to upset my markers.
Cool, thank you. And I've just got another one there as well. Did you use kind of any kind of proctoring or tools in conjunction when doing exams on Gradescope?
Chuck, do you want? Do you want to go first? Someone else? I'm happy to answer from Melbourne's experience. Right, from Melbourne's experience, we don't. It's something we are looking at going forward, but we, as a university, we had some concerns around the use of some of the online proctoring tools. So it was a university decision not to use online proctoring. That's not to say going forward, we're certainly looking at how we might be able to use Gradescope when we return to campus with a lockdown browser, closed networks and things like that. But for online proctoring tools, we've, as a university, decided we didn't want to go down that path.
Okay, maybe I can add a few comments. So in my experience, because we don't experience lockdown in the past year, so actually our all exams are do it in classroom. So yeah, we don't use any proctoring tool. But I think even we do it in an online exam, I don't think, so far we don't use any proctoring tool, but at least something it is good in Gradescope is it's easy, very easy for you to catch cheating if it is an online exam. Because you grade question by question, and it's very easy to review. I mean, you have different rubric items, right? And after you grade one question, if you feel strange that there are some special type of answer happening frequently, then you will click the rubric item to easy to access those submission, and you can have a very detailed review of those submission. So although we don't have online proctoring tool at this point, but Gradescope can really help us to check if there's any suspicious submission. So that's something Gradescope can help.
Yeah, I will add to that. Very much that it does detect common answers. I started calling Maggie Miss Turnitin at one stage last year because she across 200 papers was able to go, I've read this before, went back, and we did find a few similarities quite easily.
Perfect. And I've just got one more question, and it was about using Gradescope for assessment in complex design problems in subjects like civil engineering. So I know their panelists on here aren't from civil engineering disciplines, but can you maybe talk a little bit about how you've used it with like maybe kind of longer response questions, or where students might have had to draw diagrams or something like that?
As I said in my presentation, like we've had like chemistry use it with drawing diagrams. Our economics department gets people to draw graphs. Chung Wei showed where M1P circuit design, so it can certainly be used for diagram drawing. And you just take the screenshot, take the image, upload it. Maybe a bit more complex on the marking side because it might be a bit more one by one, but at least similar diagrams will still be grouped together. My personal feeling using Gradescope and helping colleagues in a range of economics, finance, accounting subjects is we haven't found anything yet that we wouldn't use Gradescope for. Probably the one thing that Gradescope's not quite as good at is that multiple choice randomization is not really designed for that, but that longer answer question, yeah. If you can take a screen, if you can take an image of it and upload it, it can be mapped by Gradescope, in my opinion.
And like just to add to Matt's answer a little bit, I think it depends. Like even if you're doing like a combination, some answers you want the student to type directly into the exam, and some answers you want it to be uploaded. I think you're able to do that via the online assignment because there is a combination of answer, whether it's a insert a particular field that they can answer, or you could request like a file upload answer, which they could upload a file.
Yeah, and the physics example we showed earlier was doing that.
Yeah, my point is, of course, I don't know how complex the answer will be, but I think the problem is mainly probably the resolution of the scanner. Yeah, I mean, but if you can have a very good quality for the scanning, I think Gradescope is, is doable. Yeah, for complex design problem. Yeah.
Wonderful. That's all we've got from the attendees. So thank you.
All right, thank you. So I just have one more question. We've got 3 minutes, and this is going to be like a rapid fire. If there was one thing you'd like to share with your peers, because the purpose of this is to share lessons learned. If there was one thing you'd like to share with your peers who are considering Gradescope, what would that be? Maggie. Sorry,
Just about to think about this a bit. Does someone else have an answer straight away? I'm still thinking.
Yeah, I would say while grading's never fun, at least Gradescope makes it bearable.
Okay, so your question is, can you repeat again? You say
if there was one thing you'd like to share with your peers who are listening on this call, who are considering Gradescope, what would that be?
One thing to share. Okay, one thing I want to share is we can announce homework grade in 2 minutes, and we can announce exam grade in 24 hours. That's stats. Yeah, that's how we use it. Yes.
Perfect.
Okay.
Back to me again. In terms of, this is more not from a benefit perspective, but if you're thinking of using Gradescope, really think about sort of how you want to structure your answer and what format would best suit your need, whether it's online exam or online assignment or the exam homework structure where you upload. So consider what would best suit your need, and that should be the starting point of sort of your decision to use Gradescope.
Perfect. All right, we're just on top of the hour. I want to say a big thank you to my amazing Gradescope users, Matt, Maggie, and Chungwei, who've actually agreed to come on this call and share the experience. Just re-emphasizing that the purpose of doing this is to start the process of creating a community of practice where academics can learn from other academics and what you're doing. I don't know what this is going to grow into, but hopefully we've started the conversation. I want to say a big thank you again and hope everyone is safe. Melbourne, sorry to hear about the lockdown, but we are in this together. Thank you, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
Bye.